welcome back to Crave. Bentornati a Crave. Welcome to our 8th episode now as a podcast. I'm so excited today to kick off another season filled with Italian culture, Italian-American lifestyle, and of course, 49ers football. I'm here in studio with Alex Lopez. Buongiorno, Alex.
Buongiorno.
And today we're also very excited because we have an Italian-American doctor. Because we are still celebrating the Italian-American Heritage Month. And doctors are so important, right?
Yeah.
Doctors are so important, and we believe they deserve also to be highlighted, especially here on Crave. Come stai, Alex?
You're like, go to bed. I'm doing good. This week has been a little crazy for me, especially Sunday. I ended up going to the 49ers game, which we'll get into a little bit later. But after,
Yes.
I got to see my best friend ever, Maya, and she lives a little farther from us, so I don't get to see her all the time. So it was really nice. She drove all the way to Levi Stadium, picked me up. And then we drove to Chase Center, and we went to go see Charlie XCX and Troye Sivan in concert. It was amazing, and it was so nice to catch up with her. It felt like it had been forever.
That's so nice.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm good. Actually, today is going to be, I feel like a little different. I woke up this morning and usually I do my routine. I wake up making coffee, I will, feeding my animals, go over a couple of things. But today also, I have a special quote I want to really share and the book, I think you know, Alex, the book, Melody Beatty.
Yes, you got me one.
Yes, and it's so nice. They have a quote for every day, kind of like uplifting your day. So the quote for today is, then let yourself heal. Take a responsibility for your behaviors. Let the emotion clear. Then you will see what the universe has done. It just created healing scenario for you and gentle trigger to the past, a gentle step forward to your heart. I love this quote because also really remind me the healing start by feeling our past and taking responsibility for our actions. And instead avoid, all the emotion. Sometimes we want to kind of hiding. It's important too that we let them clear. I really believe only when the emotion they clear, then when we can, open a new door. So that's how I just want to share this quote because it was really related to me today. Sometimes we still live in the past, and it's very important also to just kind of let go and open a new door. So when we close the past, a new door can open.
Definitely. I think, too, it's like one of those things where a lot of the times people don't like to feel their pain and what they've experienced. But I think sometimes you have to in order to be able to move to the next step. And also healing is not linear. So, there are days where you're doing good and then days you're not doing so good. But I think that's a part of the process. And eventually you will get to a point where you can fully turn the page and move on to the next chapter.
Yeah, and I didn't choose the page. It just happened on the quote October 22nd. And I was reading and said, oh, this is very interesting. It's very, that's why I want to share with you, with all of you. That's
beautiful.
Today we have fantastic guest, Dottore Maurizio Bonacini, a leading expert in gastroenterology and liver diseases. I won't go through his entire impressive bio, but I will say his work on liver disease, especially hepatitis and steatosis, has made a big impact. Dr. Maurizio Bonacini was born in Lecce, Puglia, Italy, and his journey to the US is truly inspiring. We are so excited to have him with us today at Crave. Welcome to Crave, Maurizio.
Thank you.
For those who might not know, can you explain what gastroenterology and hepatology involve?
So gastroenterology is the study of the digestive system. Hepatology is the study of liver diseases. Traditionally, in digestive diseases, the liver has been considered part of the digestive system because it's an organ that's, for instance, secretes bile that helps us digest. But that organ, performs so many other functions that's really sort of reductive to say, oh, it's just a digestive appendage. It's actually an extremely important organ without which you couldn't live, essentially.
Can you share a bit about your journey from Lecce to becoming a doctor in US?
Well, it's an interesting question. So, how much time do you have? No, just kidding. So, basically, I was born in Lecce because my father, who's from northern Italy, was in sorry, not the U.S., the Italian Air Force. So, basically, I'm a military kid. So, I happened to be born there. My mother is from Naples. And then after a few years in Lecce, we moved to Rome and then Florence. And then, believe it or not, we lived 2 years in Africa, in Central Africa. And that's where I started learning French, and I went to the Belgian schools. When we came back to Italy, my father says, well, would you prefer to study in Belgium? And basically I said yes, and that's where my brother and I studied in high school and then medical school in Belgium. And there, so how do you go from Belgium to the United States then? Well, at that time, the many American medical students that did not get accepted into American medical students sought to study either in Mexico or in Italy or in Belgium. And so there I met an American community, also because my father was then working in NATO, he needed to learn English, so we had American medical students in our house to practice our English. And then sort of the rest is history, because I then decided maybe about 5 years in my medical school training. Remember, in Belgium, it's 7 years of medical school. I decided to come to New York to have a taste of American medicine. They call it that a sub-internship. So it's a rotation for medical students. And basically, I loved the way they were teaching, and the rest is history, essentially.
How did your experience study at the University of Louvain, and you also study at USC, one of the best schools, okay, shape your approach to medicine and influence your career?
So USC was actually sort of my last educational stop in the United States. Before that, I first did this, as I mentioned, this sub-internship in New York. So everything started with actually a part of Queens called Elmhurst, and there was this hospital called Elmhurst General, where I was thrown in there, and I learned what they say in American medicine, basically see one, do one, teach one. So as opposed to in Europe, since you asked me to contrast the two, where you basically have to wait a long time before you can actually do a procedure on your own, in the United States they throw you to the lion, so to speak. So you have to do essentially anything that needs to be done. You have to learn with patience. So you learn much quicker, and you learn more to be sort of to apply your knowledge. In Europe, the emphasis was to get the knowledge, know stuff. In the United States was apply the things that you learn on a clinical situation, which is much more practical, much more useful actually to the patient at the end of the day.
So, what led you to focus on liver complications, especially HIV and hepatitis?
So that's a very good question. It's going to take me a few minutes to answer that, because there are two different parts. So when I came first to the United States, after my Elmhurst experience, I did my typical residency. So it's 3 years for internal medicine. And I spent this in a hospital that's now called New York Hospital of Queens. Used to be called Booth Memorial. It used to be a Salvation Army hospital in Queens. And this I started in 1983. This was basically at the height of the AIDS epidemic. We didn't even know what HIV really was. We had the inkling it was a virus. There was no test. The test came out in 1985. And so I remember that basically I was taking care of an HIV patient, and it was 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I was really tired, not paying attention. What did I do? I took the needle that I took in blood from the patient, and I stuck myself. And I said, oh, that's not good, but okay, whatever. I didn't worry so much. And then it gave me the impetus to really study these patients further. And so now, fast forward 3 years later, now I'm a USC in 1986, and that's where I started to do my what's called a fellowship in gastroenterology, and I added 1 year of hepatology, so for liver disease, with a great man. I'll mention his name, Dr. Telfer Reynolds, who was really my guiding light, my mentor, really. And then I put the two and two together, the HIV complication of liver diseases, or the liver disease complication of HIV, should I say. And then I started my academic career from there, basically.
Your bio is so impressive, by the way. I was looking your bio, Maurizio. You have an amazing bio.
Really? No, there are a lot of people that are much, much more impressive, but
Well, by the
anyway,
way,
thank you.
yeah. So the CDC recommends testing all US adult for hepatitis B. How can this be achieved, especially in the higher risk of the community?
Wow, it's a very good question. So, hepatitis B is one of my pet projects, actually. I'm currently involved with at least two studies that aim at curing hepatitis B. Currently, hepatitis B is not curable. So clearly, there are some high-risk populations, like patients from Asia, patients from sub-Saharan Africa, and also their offspring, who sometimes don't get tested. So the CDC came out with a triple test recommendation, and unfortunately, many primary doctors get confused about all this antigen antibody, but there are three tests that need to be done to see if you have the hepatitis B currently, if you have latent hepatitis B, and also if you're negative for the first two, if you have the antibodies, which means you're basically protected, likely because you got the vaccine. So yes, the CDC recommends that for all Americans. The problem is, how do you convince patient to be tested? How do you convince primary doctor? They're so busy, they have 10 minutes to see a patient that has diabetes, hypertension, comes with a cold. Well, you understand, testing for hepatitis B sort of takes the elevator down in the priority scale. So it's a little difficult, but at least we should tackle the high-risk patients. So immigrants from Asia, sub-Saharan Africa, patients on dialysis. There's a long list of high-risk patients. Ideally, everybody would know their status, because hepatitis B is very preventable. If you get 3 shots, you basically cannot get hepatitis B.
And what progress has been made in treatment for hepatitis B and C recently?
So yes, as a background, hepatitis B and C are two viruses, okay? Both have an attraction, we call it tropism, to the liver. So they infect the liver only. Hepatitis C, we've been knowing hepatitis B for longer, and we have been developing, in part because of the HIV epidemic, pharmaceutical companies that develop medications that have been able to suppress hepatitis B as well as HIV, but not cure it. That's why right now we are running clinical studies with the aim of curing hepatitis B. So here in San Francisco. Hepatitis C has been named, in fact, it was named hepatitis C when I was studying hepatology. So I basically followed the saga of hepatitis C from the beginning, when people first gave it a name and the antibody became available in the late 80s, to 2016-17, when very efficient oral medication have been developed and marketed, which now cure at least 95% of patients. So hepatitis C is, I would say, well taken care of. Patients can be cured in a very large proportion of cases. Hepatitis B is a completely different story. It's a little bit like HIV. You can suppress it. In our state of knowledge right now, we can not cure it.
Well, could you explain that, like, the do you call it fatty liver disease?
Yes, so fatty liver disease has been known for a long time. Alcohol can give fatty liver. Diabetes can give fatty liver. So actually, the story is very interesting. It started in Minnesota, where doctors were biopsying women They tended to be obese, diabetic, and found liver disease that under a microscope looked exactly like alcoholic liver disease. And basically, these women were accused of drinking, and they said, we don't really drink. And then finally, people realized that it was a real disease, and so was called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That's abbreviated NAFLD, so NAFLD. Then recently, some doctors decided that fatty was stigmatizing, non-alcoholic is a negative, so they decided to call it, in great part I agree, and we call it now metabolic because it's mainly associated with the metabolic disorder, which is diabetes. Steatotic, which is a fancy term to say fatty, but we don't say the term fat, the three-letter bad word, so we call it metabolic associated steatotic liver disease, which is one and the same essentially. And unfortunately, we have an epidemic of this because look around you. Many people are diabetic, pre-diabetic, obese, high cholesterol. All these things lead to fat accumulation in the liver. And when fat accumulates in the liver, in some cases creates inflammation, and inflammation leads the scar tissue progression towards cirrhosis. And so many of these people end up needing a liver transplant, actually.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Like so many, details.
Yeah.
What exciting developments are coming in liver disease treatment?
So here I have to have a plug for what I do. I do clinical research, so we work with pharmaceutical companies with new medications, both for fatty liver and for hepatitis B. Hepatitis B is very exciting because intellectually is a very complicated, clever virus that's very difficult, as I mentioned already, to cure. So we're now looking at molecules to cure hepatitis B. And so we basically recruit patients that volunteer to undergo these studies to try to get a head start over the rest of the population with hepatitis B. For the fatty liver, beyond losing weight, which is very important, beyond controlling the diabetes, which is also very, very important, there are really some medications that can decrease the inflammation, can decrease the fat, can decrease the fibrosis. In fact, one of them is already on the market. Its efficacy is not fantastic, but it's a very good beginning. And so again, we have several studies. One of them is actually sponsored by a very local biotech company and has been shown very interesting results in preliminary studies. And so we have open studies about patients that have fatty liver, particularly those that have advanced liver disease, patients that have cirrhosis. They feel tired, they have complications, yet they don't have enough complication to qualify for a liver transplant, and we have something for them potentially.
So, as a part of the American Association for the Study of Liver Diseases Global Outreach, what are the biggest challenges in reducing scientific gaps between countries?
Very, very good question. So our society, so hepatologists, you remember you were asking at the beginning, different gastroenterology, hepatology. I'm a member of both societies. The main one, because I consider myself mainly a liver specialist, is the ASLD. The ASLD has realized that there's enormous gaps beyond the economics, medical gap between Western countries, the United States, Italy, Germany, England, Australia, and countries in Latin America, Africa, and even Asia. And so it's realized that there is a need to decrease the gap. I mean, it sort of makes sense. It doesn't make sense that some people would have access to a lot of medication, a lot of tests, and some people don't. So they've created this GOE, that's a global outreach and engagement group to try to have a liaison with this sort of developing country, let's say. And so there are several things that we can do. One of them is, of course, education. And, when you know that in, say, in the Philippines or in Nigeria, doctors will make 30-fold lower salaries, than in the United States, ask them to travel to, I don't know, Boston for our yearly meeting, it's really a stretch. Basically, it's not going to happen. So we need to work to offer like Zoom meetings at a very reduced cost, because we have to understand you cannot ask $500 for Zoom meetings for people that make maybe I don't know, $1,000 a month, you know. So we need to work on make sure that they know how to treat their patients. I'm not suggesting that they don't know, but we have to adjust the guidelines to the realities of those countries. What I've been doing right now, because I have several friends that practice in Nigeria, in Tanzania, in Burkina Faso, is ask them, how can we help you? What is the best effective way to help you deliver better care and therefore decreases those gaps? One of my pet projects would be to bring clinical research to Africa in particular, because if you think about it, when we develop molecules, new molecules for any disease, you hardly see any center that's from developing countries. I mean, there are exceptions, but basically there is no data from there. So how can you apply the results to all these populations? So there's no reason why in Africa we cannot find several centers of excellence that would be able to recruit patients. So that would be my pet idea, which would benefit everybody, would benefit the pharmaceutical company, would benefit the patients there, would benefit globally patients. So
Right, I agree that. Um, what cultural difference in healthcare have you noticed between Italy and the US?
now that's very interesting. So in Italy, and I'll equate Italy with Belgium. So actually, it goes back to my early days. I told you I was in New York when I realized that in Belgium, for instance, people would be more accepting of the reality of people living and people dying and people getting disease, whereas in the United States, and this was accepted basically, and so the what was accepted was really having low levels of intervention. When I got into New York, I was really shocked to find out that people, remember, there was the time before the DPOAs were very popular. People didn't leave in writing what they wanted to do. And so seeing people that were really at very low chance to survive a cardiac arrest to be aggressively resuscitated and then sometimes surviving in a vegetative state. And I thought that that was sort of ethically and probably even economically not the right thing to do. So that's a little bit the difference, which is actually quite important. And going back to Africa, you know, not many people pay attention to the fact that different cultures have different acceptances of disease and death, and we need to be cognizant of that. We cannot say, oh, take this pill because it decreases the virus that maybe will prevent cancer. I think people have to have harder endpoints to develop guidelines in other countries. So yeah, there are definitely cultural differences between the two.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to an Italian American interested in a healthcare career like you?
Wow. Mm. Well, first of all, one has to have a passion. Usually it comes down to having a mentor. I think my experience has been in many fields way beyond medicine. You have a mentor, and then you want to be emulate what he or she does. I would say if somebody would want to get into a career in health fields in general, being nursing, physician assistant, researcher, PhD, the first thing I would say is listen. Before talking, it's better to listen and read. Reading and listening is the same thing. Essentially, you just try to get information from the other person and digest it and develop your own career, essentially. Another thing that I like to say to people, and because that's once was told me when somebody told me, "Oh, don't apply to California for gastroenterology. You'll never get in because you're a foreign medical graduate." And another doctor in Queens told me, "Maurizio, don't say no to yourself." And this is what I tell my children. I tell everybody: don't say no to yourself. Don't say, "Oh, I'm not going to become a doctor. I'll become, I don't know, a physician assistant or something else." Go for what you feel you want to do and then see what happens. If you say no to yourself, then you're out of the game. Um, that's basically the thing. And also two things. I'm sorry, I wanted to say two more things to somebody young. I would say, what would people want to hear from that person in an interview? They want to hear two things. One, you work hard, and two, you work well with others. So the two key things. It doesn't matter what your MCAT score is, SAT score is. You work well with others, and you're willing to work hard. I think that two crucial tenets for a successful career.
That's a great advice. What advice would you give to aspiring doctor, especially from immigrant background?
Not any specific advice, just go for what you feel you can do. I mean, I don't know how to answer really this question. There are several avenues, even people that have low income. There are armed forces programs that allow you to become a physician and be very successful. We just, actually in hepatology, we just recently lost a friend, only 54-year-old, who was a colonel in the Air Force. He made tremendous developments in the field of fatty liver, as we were mentioning. So there's several things. So just don't say no to yourself. Go for what you feel that you want to do, what your passion is.
Right, believe in yourself too. And at Crave, that's our always last question. We love to talk about passion. What drives your passion for work, that what you're doing, and especially how do you stay motivated in such a challenging field? Because your field can be very challenging. What are you
Yeah,
doing beside to be a doctor?
well, so two questions there. One, I used to have a private practice. I stopped 3 years ago because I wanted to slow down a little bit, but I wanted to still be engaged. So I think at a certain point, it's about feeling relevant. Doing clinical research allows me to be on the cutting edge of scientific advances. This may not be scientific advances that I created, but I learned from people that created. It gives me the opportunity to ask questions, which in turn may make the other party better to answer those questions. And the fact that you can have patients access new medication is very, very exciting, because some of these medication will have clinical value, and we've been shown that over the years, because I've been doing this for now more than 30 years actually. So that's a question about, what the passion about science and helping patient is. The second part is what I like to do outside, is to keep, in good shape. I belong to a triathlon club where we do a lot of activities within swimming, bicycling, and running. So in a cohesive group, that's very, very helpful.
Great. Maurizio, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your really expertise. Grazie mille, volevo dire anche, perché mio papà è pugliese, viva la Puglia, I know you are from Puglia, Lecce,
Viva la Puglia.
right?
Yeah, I still follow the Lecce soccer team,
Uh-huh.
and yes, and although I haven't been there in a long time, it's one of the nicest and perhaps less well-known regions in Italy. So I would
Yeah.
invite everybody to go and consider visiting it.
Yeah, make sure everybody goes to Puglia. It's beautiful, right? And before Maurizio, you go, I know you're very busy. Where people can reach out to you? If anybody has a question they want to know more about, because, we had a short time.
The best is my email, so I
Mhm.
don't know how to put it, but it's BONACIM, as in Mike, 08 @gmail.com. Also, I have a website, it's Mission GH. G stands for gastroenterology, H for hepatology, Mission GH. I can have an email sent by accessing the question. Contact us on the site, on the website.
Grazie mille, Maurizio. And we
Thanks.
hope to have you soon.
Thank you so much.
This episode of Crave is sponsored by Alice Baker Inc., a family-run business with over 30 years of experience in fashion industry. They offer unique clothing for every age and every size, always going to extra miles for their customers. Visit them in Novato or online at www.alicebakerinc.com. Thank you to our sponsor for supporting this episode. Now let's go with Alex. What's going on, Alex, with 49ers?
Well, actually, I'm going to start off and let me just show you
I
the
don't.
shirt I
Sorry.
wore to Sunday's game
Uh-huh.
that my cousin Bobby designed / made for me. And this is kind of setting the tone. You can't even hear me. It's setting the tone for today's episode, you guys. Okay.
Nice.
I can't explain to you how funny it was to walk by Chiefs fans with that on. My brother and I were just dying of laughter the whole time. It was so funny. All right, let's get into it. This
Let's go.
Super Bowl rematch. And I have dreaded this game since it was announced. I'm not kidding. And I just had a gut feeling. I just knew it was going to be like this. We haven't beat the Chiefs since, I believe, 2014, including, regular season games, Super Bowls, obviously. Kyle just cannot beat their defensive coordinator. He cannot do it. And I promise you, and I tweeted this after the game, when I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. That's how much energy I'm giving them right now, okay? But when he and Andy Reid retire, I am doing 149 consecutive backflips. I can't do one, right? Right now, I could not do one. But when they retire, when they're out of this league, I will be so, so happy because they've caused me so much pain. Okay. What I will say, though, is I understand even if we had won the game, that wouldn't have erased the Super Bowl loss, And of course I wanted the Niners to win. But also at the end of the day, it's a regular season game. The first half of the season, the Chiefs are an AFC team. And losses like the Rams and the Cardinals matter more than it does for the Chiefs. I think based on like the Super Bowls, of course, you have this gut feeling where you're like, this would really heal something in me, even though it can't change it. But also, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it is, but it isn't, if that makes any sense. Some things that stood out to me are, number one, Brock had an awful game, like just horrible game. And you know what? That happens. I'd like to believe that it's going to be good for him to have that chip on his shoulder. I, however, think it's very interesting that there were people that were wanting him to be benched and wanting Brandon Allen to like come and play. Like, to me, that was very like, really, guys? Like, it kind of proves that we're a little bit spoiled in that way. But I think it's important for a quarterback to kind of have adversity. And especially a young one like Brock, who, to be honest, came into this league and the Niners were kind of firing at all gates. So let's see how, he is when we're kind of stuck at this kind of level where things aren't as perfect as it once was. And number two, I have to say, the defense was playing pretty well until the offense couldn't keep their drives alive. And then after that, of course, Patrick Mahomes, kind of got one on them, and they started playing pretty awful as well. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the same problems that we've had this entire season, which is third down offense, red zone offense, third down defense, red zone defense, and of course our special teams. We are on our third kicker. You can't make this up. We are on our third kicker. And he is known for another coach saying, I just go out there and pray every time he goes on. Like, that's where we're at. And so, there's a little, I don't know. There are people trying to compare it to when we were 3-4 a couple seasons ago. But I don't know. To me, it personally feels very different. If anything, it's more reminiscent of the 2020 season, which is a great segue into my 49ers injury update. We really got to work on a song because I'm not kidding. You can't make any of this up, and it's actually, like, really sad. Brandon Ayuk tore his ACL and MCL, so he's out for the season.
Yeah.
Debo had to go to the hospital because he had pneumonia.
Wow.
And he didn't play on Sunday. And there was a lot of discourse about it. And people are probably feeling like, oh, wow. George Kittle is day-to-day with a foot sprain. Chris Conley is day-to-day with the ankle sprain. And, of course, like I said, Jake Moody is still going to be out for the next game, and he's dealing with that high ankle sprain. And update on CMC, he has no setbacks. They're saying that he's going to be back after the bye. I don't know how to feel about that, honestly. And same with Dre Greenlaw. He has no setbacks. They're saying he'll be back a couple weeks after CMC, but I'm like, do we really want them to play? Do we? The next game, while we're recording this at least, is going to be Sunday Night Football versus the Cowboys at Levi's. I don't think the Cowboys are doing that hot either, so it should be an interesting one. And I don't mean that as, it's going to be a battle, it's going to be good. But this is how defeated I am. Like, I just feel very, depleted and, you know what? It's expected to happen with the Super Bowl hangover. That's really what I feel like it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was such a disappointing performance. I agree. But however,
Yeah.
the good news is they are still only one game out of the first place in their division, and
true.
they can still make the playoff.
I'm like,
That's
but if we make it, can we do anything?
You never know. Try to see the positive.
Yes, that's true. That's very true.
And also, you sounded, and I feel you.
Yes.
You sounded pretty down about the Cowboys game. How do you stay motivated as a fans when the team is having tough time this?
You know what? It's one of those things where I feel almost like I forgot. This sounds so cliche. I forgot what it is to be a fan. Like, for example, one of my good friends, he's a Raiders fan, and they, with peace and love, don't win a lot of games, right? And so he's just going for the vibes and the good times. For me, with the Niners, we've been so good. We've been
Amazing.
On the cusp for so many years that it's hard, right? Because there are people who see it as, oh, you know what? Like you said, we're one game out. We could still make the playoffs. All these things, but it's like we're so. I'm trying to find a word for it. Like we're just accustomed to.
You guys are used to, right?
We're used to them winning and being dominant, and
Right.
with our offense and with our defense. And so the way it is now, it's hard. You see a lot of the cracks, right? And the team is definitely different than it has been in recent years. And I think that's why number one, I think it's so different than the last time we were 3-4. And also, it's hard to stay positive because I'm seeing the holes, I'm seeing the problems. And if I'm seeing the problems, then the players are seeing the problems, the coaches are seeing the problems, and also the, other teams. And some of the problems have to do with the coaches and the players. And it's a concern. And so I'm just seeing that there are going to be some changes if we don't get on the right track. And so that's why it's hard to kind of stay positive. I'm trying. Believe it or not, I am the more positive one compared to, say, my brother.
Right, totally. I can see that.
So, I still love this team. And I always joke about it, too. On Twitter, I made a joke a couple weeks ago how the Chiefs were probably going to beat us 63-0. And I got called a fair weather fan and all these things. And I use that humor as a coping because I want them to win so bad. I love this team so much. I have a tattoo of the 49ers. So they're with me for my life. And so...
yeah. When is the next game?
Sunday Night Football, Cowboys. I'm going. Let's hope. Listen, I just feel like we need another game like we had last year. We just need a good 42-10 situation. We just shove that in front of the Cowboys fans' faces because they were laughing at us. I'm like, you can't laugh at us when last week, weren't y'all down 40-something-9, number one? And number two, we always beat you like the Chiefs always beat us. We just can't beat the Chiefs.
Let's hope for the next one, Alex.
Fingers crossed.
Let's hope.
Thank you for tuning into our 8th episode of our 5th season. follow us on Instagram at crave.show and tune in every week for a brand new episode.
And don't forget to subscribe also and check our website www.craveshow.com and see you next week. Stay tuned. Thank you. Ciao.
Bye.